In the field of psychology, Machiavellianism is a personality trait centered on manipulativeness, callousness, and indifference to morality, with high levels of self-interest. The term is derived from a 16th century Italian philosopher named Niccolò di Bernardo Machiavelli and his most famous work, The Prince. In the underworld of the American Mafia, there have been some mafiosos who embody this personality trait. To them, the ends always justify the means. They are Machiavellian Mobsters, and these are their stories. Number 21. Johnny Keys, Simone. Johnny Keys Simone was born on February 25, 1911, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Simone, as a child, would learn quick how to survive on the tough streets of South Philadelphia. After a few brushes with the law, Simone would in his teenage years move in with his cousin Angelo Bruno, where he would be a major influence on the future crime boss. While Bruno was the elder of the two, it is alleged that Simone was the man who would introduce Bruno to the criminal underworld. Johnny Simone would begin his criminal career as a thief and a bootlegger, helping to supply the patrons of South Philadelphia with the booze they craved. Simone would go on to work for a vending company in the 1940s while simultaneously carrying out hits for the Philly mob. By the end of the decade, Simone would be sponsored into the family and made by boss Joseph Ida. During the 40s and 50s, Simone would operate a successful bookmaking operation while at the same time functioning as one of the family's top hitmen. According to Sammy the Bull Gravano, Johnny Keys Simone carried out between 40 and 50 murders in his lifetime. Gravano referred to him in multiple documentaries and interviews as a hitman's hitman. With his cousin Angelo Bruno rising to the position of boss of the Philadelphia crime family, John Simone would begin his ascension within the family as well. Then in 1956, Bruno would send Simone to Trenton, New Jersey, to work under Charles Pinky Costello, who controlled the illegal gambling and numbers racket in the Trenton area. Simone would become a huge earner for the Philly mob, bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars per year for his boss, Angelo Bruno. By the time the 1960s rolled around, Simone, now known by the handle Johnny Keys, had become one of the richest members of the Philly mob. During that time, he was made capo and controlled one of the most profitable numbers rackets in the area. He also controlled all the gambling in Trenton. His numbers racket was so lucrative, he became a multimillionaire by 1970 and was one of the wealthiest members of the Philadelphia family. During these years, Simone would form a close relationship with Antonio Tony Bananas Caponegro. Caponegro was the consigliere of the Philadelphia mob and also ran the North Jersey operation for boss Angelo Bruno, based in Newark, New Jersey. Simone would grow estranged from his cousin, Philly boss Angelo Bruno, in the 1970s due to the latter banning the dealing of drugs in the family, while at the same time allowing Philly mob soldier Long John Martirano to run a huge methamphetamine operation. Even worse, Bruno allowed the Cherry Hill Gambinos, a faction of the Gambino family in New York, to run a large-scale cocaine operation on Philly mob territory. Bruno would receive his end from these operations, allowing him to profit from the selling of drugs, while at the same time shutting the rest of the Philly mob out of the business. Many in the Philly mob still dealt in drugs in the shadows, but the rank and file knew what the penalty was if they were caught: a bullet in the head. Tired of the hypocrisy and greed of Philly boss Angelo Bruno, Tony Caponegro concocted a plot to remove Bruno from the top spot. First, he would consolidate his power base within his own family. Caponegro's first visit would be with Johnny Keys Simone. Simone agreed to support Caponegro and would become his underboss. Frank the Barracuda Sindone was also brought into the plot and would take over the consigliere spot under Caponegro. Caponegro's brother-in-law, Alfred Salerno, would make his bones on the hit, and immediately after taking the oath would be made a capo. After shoring up his base, Caponegro would then meet with Genovese front boss Frank Thierry, who convinced Caponegro that he had commission approval to kill Bruno. In March of 1980, Caponegro would send Simone and Simone to meet with John Stanfa, a Sicilian hood and family associate in New York City, to bring him in on the plot. The plan was that Simone would get Bruno's normal driver replaced with Stanfa. On the night of the hit, Stanfa would lower Bruno's window slightly, allowing the assassin a clean shot. Sources differ on who fired the fatal shot, however the result was quite clear. On March 21, 1980, the 69-year-old Bruno was killed by a shotgun blast to the head as he sat in his car in front of his home near the intersection of 10th Street and Snyder Avenue in the Lower Meo-Mensing neighborhood of South Philadelphia. Most believe the unknown gunman to have been Caponegro's cousin, Alfred Salerno. Afterwards, Caponegro, Simone, and their conspirators toasted to the future while Caponegro made plans to travel to New York, where he was sure he would be made the new boss of the family. However, there was treachery afoot. When the commission learned of Bruno's murder, the Genovese family volunteered to investigate and met out punishment. The Genovese then summoned Caponegro at once. Caponegro went there believing he was going to receive the blessing of the commission to become the next boss in Philadelphia. Caponegro would be taken from a local bar in Greenwich Village to the Triangle Social Club, presumably to meet with the Genovese hierarchy, consisting of Frank Funzi Thierry, Fat Tony Salerno, and Vincent the Chin Gigante. Once there, Caponegro was told that the murder had not been considered, let alone sanctioned by the commission. He turned helplessly to Frank Thierry, who sat stone-faced. When he identified Thierry as the man who had authorized the murder, Thierry categorically denied it. The commission ruled that Caponegro had murdered a commission member without authorization. Caponegro was then brutally murdered on the direct orders of Vincent the Chin Gigante. On April 18, 1980, Caponegro and his brother-in-law, Alfred Salerno, were found dead, battered, and nude in the trunk of a car in the Bronx. Now Johnny Keys Simone and Frank the Barracuda Sindone stood alone against the Testa Scarfo faction of the Philly mob, which, while formidable on their own, also had the backing of all 5 families in New York. Simone's first move was to contact his longtime friend, Cleveland Mafia boss, James T. Niccolò, and ask him for help in eliminating Phil Testa and taking over the Philly mob. Niccolò would double-cross Simone, however, and would report their conversation to the commission. The commission would then officially sanction a hit on Johnny Keys Simone. Things would take a fatal turn for Simone when he was spotted eating at Friendly's Cafe with Gambino's soldiers Pal Joey Farnella and Nicky Russo. The commission was informed and assumed that the Gambinos were backing Johnny Keys on the sneak. Gambino boss Paul Castellano denied this assertion. The commission then deemed that the hit be handed down to the Gambino family, since Gambino soldiers were able to meet with Johnny Keys. The Gambinos carrying out the hit would also prove that they were not in fact backing Simone. Gambino family boss Paul Castellano would then give the hit to a young up-and-coming member of the family, Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano. Pal Joey Farnella and Nicky Russo, along with members of Gravano's crew, would assist on the hit. After determining that they could not commit the murder at Friendly's due to a high number of witnesses and possible collateral damage, Gravano would then set up a meeting with Simone at his social club in Trenton, New Jersey, through Nicky Russo and Pal Joey, who were still friendly with the Philly mobster. The plan going forward was to convince Simone that Castellano was going to back him in the war versus the Testa Scarfo faction, and that Castellano would speak for him at commission meetings. According to Gravano, during these first meetings with Simone, Gravano would represent himself poorly, causing the wary streetwise mobster to relax and let his guard down. Finally, the trap was set when Gravano convinced Simone that Paul Castellano wanted to meet with him at the Skyview Country Club. At the meet, Simone was snatched from the Skyview Country Club at the airport in Washington Township and thrown in a van parked in the lot. The plan went awry, however, when Pal Joey forgot to leave the keys to the car they arrived in, with Nicky Russo, whose job it was to drive it off the lot. This was an especially scary moment for Gravano, not only because there may have been witnesses to the abduction, but also because the crew's fingerprints were all over the car, and Gravano had a pistol stashed under the seat with his prints on the weapon. The crew would drive Simone to Staten Island, where they would wait for word about what happened to the car and Nicky Russo. During this time, Gravano would gain tremendous respect for Simone and the way he carried himself. Gravano described this encounter in great detail in his autobiography Underboss, as well as his podcast Our Thing, including honoring a request to remove Simone's shoes as a message of love to his wife. Finally, with the news that Nicky Russo got away with the car and there would be no repercussions, Johnny Keys Simone was executed by Louis Melito and Sammy Gravano. On September 17, 1980, John Simone was found dead due to multiple gunshot wounds to the head. On October 29, 1980, the last perpetrator of the Bruno hit, Frank Sindone, was found dead in an alley behind a variety store in South Philadelphia. He was shot 3 times in the head. Phil Testa would be made boss of the Philly family. However, his reign would be short-lived. He too would be killed the very next year. John Simone was described by Gravano as a hitman's hitman and Cosa Nostra to the core. Simone was also extremely intelligent and was true to Machiavellianism in its purest form, choosing to betray his own cousin over money and power. Despite losing the eventual chess game to the Genovese family, he will forever be remembered as a true mobster, and his story will live on as an important part of Cosa Nostra history.